Back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have breaking news fresh out of New Hampshire. A jury has reached a verdict in the small town secrets murder trial for Timothy Verrill. This comes after the judge instructed the jury this morning to restart their deliberations after one of the jurors fell ill and had to be replaced by an alternate. Those are the rules. That's what happened. But interesting, the first jury group deliberated for 11 hours and 45 minutes over 3 days. But the second jury only deliberated for a total of 4 hours and 32 minutes. We know there's now a verdict. We're waiting for the jury to get back in the courtroom. Defendant Timothy Verrill faces life in prison if found guilty of the 2017 murder of Christine Sullivan and Jenna Pellegrini. Prosecutors say that he killed the women after believing that Pellegrini was tipping off the police about his drug business. While we wait for the judge to take the bench and the jury to come back in for the verdict, here is more on the case against Timothy Verrill.
In 2017, 2 women were brutally murdered, and prosecutors say Timothy Verrill was the killer. He is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of reckless second-degree murder, and 5 counts of falsifying physical evidence. Verrill's first trial in October of 2019 ended in a mistrial because the judge found the New Hampshire State Police failed to provide information to the defense, including recordings of witnesses' interviews and emails between witnesses and investigators.
On what date did you actually request this trial?
It was October 31st. The state had rested the defense. We had called several witnesses already.
48-year-old Christine Sullivan and 32-year-old Jenna Pellegrini were stabbed and beaten in the early morning hours of January 27, 2017 at Christine Sullivan's home. Sullivan lived there with her boyfriend, Dean Smorunk. Pellegrini was staying with them. Pellegrini and Sullivan's bodies were found under the home's porch. Investigators say Verrill was part of a drug trafficking business with Sullivan and her boyfriend. Prosecutors allege Verrill murdered them because he believed Pellegrini was a police informant. Smorunk was out of town at the time of the murder and found the bodies of the 2 women. In the first trial, Verrill's defense painted Smorunk as the real killer. Recently, Pellegrini's father posted a tribute to his daughter, wishing that she could see her kids growing up. And in it, he quotes Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven. And says, quote, "We celebrate the life of Jenna and Christine. You left us lost in pain. This year, we hope to get some closure from this horrible tragedy. We soon shall see justice for our loved ones."
I want to welcome my guest for this hour, criminal defense attorney Robin Nunn. Robin, thank you for joining me. We understand that people are coming into that courtroom for the verdict. We'll be able to show that in a moment. I will only cut you off if they start to talk, so I apologize in advance. Tell me, Robin, what you think about the fact that there's a jury deliberating 3 days, 11 plus hours, and then one is sick. They bring in the alternate, they start over, those are the normal rules, and now they've been deliberating 4 hours, 32 minutes, and there's a verdict.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very fast deliberation, considering that there's a new jurist on the panel who has to be brought up to speed, who has to, has been out of, what the others have heard for, a significant period of time. It's somewhat shocking that 4 hours later, there's a decision. So I think I think that does not bode well for the defendant. Unfortunately, usually in situations like this where there is a quick decision, that could lead to a result against the defendant's interests.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm surprised it's this quick. I, too, don't think that's necessarily favorable to the defendant. There are 11 counts in this case. He's got counts of second-degree murder, first-degree murder, as well as falsifying physical evidence. And listening to the whole trial, I think everybody might agree that he was involved in the cleanup at a minimum. Is it possible, theoretically, that there could be a split verdict where the jury finds guilty on some counts and not guilty on other counts?
Yeah, I definitely feel like with so many counts at play, 11 counts, that there is a likelihood that there will not be unanimous decision on all counts as far as guilt. I think that there will be probably some split decisions, and that's why they bring so many counts. Rarely is it such the case where they kind of come in across the board with a guilty verdict on all. So hopefully there'll be some decisiveness. There was a lot of evidence in this case. DNA analysts testified. There were witnesses. There was a lot of discovery issues. This case obviously came about after a mistrial had been called on a previous case. So there was a tremendous amount of information to digest here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And all that evidence, very circumstantial case, no direct evidence, no video, no eyewitness that he was the one that committed the murders. Let's do this. We are looking right now. This is a live shot for any joining us. The jury is presumably entering or has entered the courtroom. That's why everyone is standing up. We understand we can hear the judge. Let's go in.
Madam Foreperson, would you please stand? Madam Foreperson, it's my understanding that the jury has reached a verdict on each of the charges before it. Is that correct? And is the jury's verdict unanimous on each of the charges?
Yes, it is.
At this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to take the verdict, and she'll do so by following through the verdict form that you have. Please respond to her questions. Madam Clerk?
Good afternoon, ma'am. This to charge ID number 143-8515C, charging the defendant with the first-degree murder of Christine Sullivan. As the jury finds the defendant guilty or not guilty, defendant not. As to charge ID number 143-8516C, charging the defendant with the second-degree murder of Christine Sullivan. As the jury finds the defendant guilty or not guilty, charge ID number 143-8517C, charging the defendant with the first-degree murder of Jenna Pellegrini. As the jury finds the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him not guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? This is charge ID number 143-851E-C, charging the defendant with the second-degree murder of Jenna Pellegrini. As the jury finds the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? As to charge ID number 143-8519C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing the body of Christine Sullivan. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? As to charge ID number 143-8520C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing the body of Jenna Pellegrini. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? As to charge ID number 143-8521C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, altering blood stain on exterior porch. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? As to charge ID number 143-8522C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing blood-stained sheet and personal belongings in a black trash bag. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? And finally, as to charge ID number 143-8523C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing blood-stained items in a clear trash bag. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Is that the verdict of all of you? Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Before I release the jury, is there anything from either party? So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service in this case. I would ask, only if you wish to, remain in the deliberation room. I'd like to come around and thank you personally for your service in the case. You are not required to stay. If you choose to leave, you should feel free to do so. All right, thank you. It would only be a few minutes before I'm back there.
All right.
Be seated. So first, there'll be the matter of Mr. Verrill's sentencing. First, Attorney Nye, would you request a pre-sentence investigation prior to sentencing? No? All right. State? What I'll do is ask the parties to coordinate with the clerk before you leave today to select a hearing date. I suspect it'll be at least a month out, maybe longer, depends on the court's docket. Is there anything further that we need to address? Attorney Nye? All right. Thank you.
All right, Robin Nunn, can you believe it? The House audio wasn't working in the first few counts. Let's talk about what we know definitively. The second I get word on the others, I'm going to let everyone know. We know the guilty on 5 charges that had to do with the physical evidence. This is a split verdict. We know that the falsifying physical evidence or altering or destroying and concealing the body of Christine Sullivan and Jenna Pellegrini, 5 different counts, guilty. We know that definitively. I'm not surprised on that piece. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think we talked about this right before we went into the verdict and didn't think it was going to be great for the defendant, unfortunately, and did not think it was going to be unanimous across the board with all the counts, but that there would be some where he was found guilty, many of which, you know, is the case, and some that he was obviously not found guilty.
And again, based on the evidence presented, we brought this trial to our viewers. We watched along with them. I'm not at all surprised, given things that he did, his clothes, blood on his clothes, the interesting night that he says that a witness said he told him about that night, asking for a pair of pants, and that he had an interesting night. Some of the other testimony, I'm not at all surprised on those counts. I think it was pretty clear he was involved in the cleanup, disposing of the bodies. Now, the first-degree murders and the second-degree murders, just to recount what was possible. First-degree murder versus second-degree. First-degree murder carries life without parole. Second-degree murder, knowing, is 30 or 40 years up to life without parole. So certainly, if it's a guilty on second degree, that could be a better sentence for him versus the first-degree life without parole. A significant difference as to which of those, if either, there's a guilty on.
Yeah, I completely agree. The sentences carry along with the offenses that he's found guilty of, and some of them carry significant jail time. These were really brutal, sort of heinous crimes. These women were stabbed many, many, many times. It was a really tragic and horrific crime, and with it carries a very steep penalty.
Yeah, and I heard of one not guilty. So we know there are some not guilties in here somewhere. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to seek clarification. As soon as we have that, we're going to come back to you. And in a moment, we're going to get back to where the defendant Mew is on this stand. That's in the case that we've been following about the Apple River stabbing. Stay tuned. We have a lot to bring you right after this break.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, diving deeper into the case of Sebastian Rogers, a missing 15-year-old boy with autism. We'll bring you the latest developments as the search continues.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. So much going on. Thank you for joining us. New Hampshire, versus Timothy Verrill. This is the one that the verdict just came in. We now have clarification. The 2 counts of first-degree murder, not guilty. 4 counts of second-degree murder, guilty on all 4 counts. You may ask how 4 counts when you have 2 victims. It's because there was 1 count of knowing, another count of reckless for each of the 2 victims. Therefore, the 4 convictions for second-degree murder. We will keep you posted on any new developments, but he has been convicted, a split verdict.
Has reached a verdict in this small-town secrets murder trial going on in New Hampshire.
This is charge ID number 143-8518C, charging the defendant with the second-degree murder of Jenna Pellegrini as the jury found the defendant guilty or not guilty. We find him guilty. Set the verdict following. This is charge ID number 143-8519C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing the body of Christine Sullivan. Has the jury found the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Set the verdict to following. As to charge ID number 143-8520C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing the body of Jenna Pellegrini. Has the jury found the defendant guilty or not guilty? We find him guilty. Set the verdict to following. As to charge ID number 143-8521C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, altering blood stain on exterior porch. Now, does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
We find him guilty.
Is that the verdict of all counts? As to charge ID number 143-8522C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing blood-stained sheet and personal belongings in a trash bag. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
We find him guilty.
Is that the verdict of all? And finally, as to charge ID number 143-8523C, charging the defendant with falsification of physical evidence, concealing blood-stained items in a clear trash bag. How does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
We find him guilty.
As you heard, it was a split verdict in the case against Timothy Verrill, with the jury acquitting him of the most serious charges of first-degree murder in the deaths of Jenna Pellegrini and Christine Sullivan. Verrill showed little emotion, as you saw, as that verdict was read. Now, afterwards, he was handcuffed and taken into custody. The verdict came just 3 hours into deliberations today. Interesting, this morning, the jury had to start the entire process of deliberations over again after one of the jurors was dismissed because of illness. They called in and said they were sick and couldn't come in. So an alternate stepped in. The previous jury had deliberated nearly 12 hours over 3 days without reaching a verdict. Now, Verrill will face sentencing at a later date. We'll let you know what that date is when we find out. All right.